Okay, half your grade comes from reviews. They're like a job review. On the job, most of these reviews are completely personal. They're not related to your group. In this class, think of the reviews as a test, and the final review, which is a group grade, as the final. So there are 4 reviews or tests and 1 group or project review, which is like a final. A review is something verbal that's done with your instructor. It's done in the classroom most of the time. It's usually very short. You have your ideas on how many points you should get for certifications and hours and push and everything else, and the instructor does, and hopefully you come to some kind of an agreement fairly quickly about what those points are. The certifications are things that you learn on your own for your project, and these result in deliverables because your goal is to help somebody else learn faster than you are. Hours you have added up in your project notebook, so the instructor just looks at your notebook, finds the hours, and then translates that into points. Push is something subjective. This is where you and your instructor might have a bit of a conversation. And then everything else is just a survey of the electronic documents you created, the CAD files, the circuit designs, the programs, the Google documents that are deliverables that are linked up to your work breakdown, to the activity summary, project document, problem statement, and all the documents associated with the project. Everything else is a check mark. Did you do a good photograph? Did you do a good video? Did you link it up properly? So that's where we have a conversation to talk about the online presence of your group. And then the last conversation is about how the group's doing. Have you moved to the performing stage or not? Each review is 200 points, but there's multiple ways to get those 200 points. So let's say that you don't push the project forward at all. That's the subjective part. But you max out certifications, hours, and everything else. That gives you 300 points. So that gets knocked down to 200 points into the gradebook. But most people don't max out these categories. They get partials in each one of them, and those add up to 200 points. So if the review discussion with your instructor gets really long, you don't get 200 points, you want to know why. If the conversation gets too long in class, then the instructor will just say, hey, let's talk about this outside of class time. So let's look at how to improve certifications. Do tasks that require you to learn something. So if you already know it, you're not going to get certifications. The goal of an engineer is always to learn something new. Repeating what you already know over and over and over again turns you into a technician. So you're going to be rewarded when you push yourself, when you learn how to pattern in Inventor, that kind of thing. So you need to be learning stuff for your project, not for yourself. If you have any doubts, talk to your instructor before you attempt a task that requires you learning something. You have to document something when you learn. Link to the YouTube playlist you found. Link to the website that spoke to you and was most relevant to the project and had steps that you followed. So outline the learning steps that you took so others in the future can follow them and learn faster than you. Pushing a project forward is a talent. This is where you're going to disagree with your professor more than anything. The characteristics of people that can push a project forward: read everything. They understand the big picture. They read between the lines of the problem statement. They communicate more. They talk more with everybody, with the professor, with their group mates, with the client, with the customers. And they're aggressive. They argue, they confront. It feels disrespectful. But in that confronting, in that arguing, in that clearing up in their own minds exactly what's wanted and needed, they take that tension and make it creative. They make it inspiring, and they externalize it. They said, hey, we disagree about this. This is fun. So it's in the disagreements and misunderstandings that projects are pushed forward. And if you don't create any waves, if you don't go to the storming stage of a group, then nobody's going to push the project forward. The everything else category are basically deliverables, things that the professor looks at. And you can see there's 10 of them, and you can get a max of 10 points in each category and get 100 points. Half of your review can be just doing all these things. So if you do your notebook perfectly, you can get 10 points. If you put graphics in your notebook perfectly, you can get 10 points. Similarly with all these things. Now, you're going to be asking, well, what is problem solving? What are presentations? Why didn't I get 10 points in presentations? And the instructor will verbally say something to you about that. So if you attempt a presentation, or let's say you take a physical video and you don't turn your camera landscape, you leave it in portrait. So it's a long, narrow, skinny video with a bunch of black bars on the left and the right-hand side. Well, then you're not going to get full credit. So there's tons of details in each one of these categories, and there's a link right here to those details. Let's see. Rubrics. Okay, so let's look at notebook graphics, presentations. Let's look at problem solving. Okay, does not acknowledge problems exist. Activities are within the problem boundaries. Plays around with the problem but never directly addresses it. Owns the problem and brainstorms. Narrows the problem down to what can be solved by revising problem statements. So this is that problem category. This is probably the most mysterious one. So this is an everything else grading example. The notebook was done perfectly, signed in and out, wrote in triplets, going to do doing in rant. Didn't have any graphics in it. They got 6 points for participating in the group. They can talk about what everybody else in the group's doing. They can talk about differences of opinion and consensus building. They're aware of deadlines inside their work breakdown, and they're revising problem statements and requirements. So that got him 6 points for participating in the group. Presentations, he started one, maybe did a slide in it, and linked something up that was pretty cool. Documentation, got started in it. You don't have to finish things to get these everything else points. Okay, so let's go through these reviews again. What physically happens? In class, at some time on the day when your review's due, the instructor will ask you to come over and you'll do a review. He'll write something on a piece of paper and it'll be over with. You have to come with your notebook, and the notebook has to have the hours working on the project added up. So the instructor can just say, I'm not going to give you any hour points if you don't have your notebook hours added up. This is typically done on the first page of the notebook in the table of contents. The instructor, before the review, before the class starts, is going to have looked through the work breakdown sheet, clicked on all the links of the tasks you worked on, and look at your work and form an opinion about the categories. So if you didn't document stuff in Google Drive, or you documented it and it doesn't have the link set up properly, then you will not get any credit. So that has to be done. That's the work you do beforehand, before the review. If you don't come in prepared, you don't get any points. Now, maybe the next review you'll get the points, but you only get 200 points per review. So the review is a big deal. Treat it like a test. Every class, the instructor will be conducting reviews. Smaller classes might have 1 or 2 people being reviewed every class. Larger classes could have up to 4 people being reviewed on a particular day. The reviews happen on Mondays and Wednesdays or Tuesdays and Thursdays. Your review date might not be the same as anybody else's review date. Look in Canvas for your review dates. Prepare by adding up your project hours in your notebook. Get your Google Documents all linked up. So at the beginning of the interview, at the beginning of the review, the instructor can have read everything and give you the maximum number of points. Good luck.